And now to our main business of tonight, which is, of course, the CPI. But before we get into that conversation, let's get to see this report put together by correspondent Muplang Dako.
It's not because of the rebasing that the inflation rate come down. It will still come down, but not the same way, because the old one will be comparing with 2009, and that's why you see that gap.
The National Bureau of Statistics recently updated Nigeria's inflation measurement by rebasing the Consumer Price Index to 2024, aligning it with current economic realities. As part of the exercise, the number of items in the consumer price basket increased from 740 to 934, providing a more detailed assessment of inflationary trends.
This increase was mainly driven by food and non-alcoholic beverages, restaurants and accommodation services, as well as transport.
A 50-kilogram bag of rice, which sold for 100,000 naira in December 2024, is now between 80,000 naira and 90,000 naira, up from 60,000 naira at the beginning of last year. While there has been a slight reduction in the prices of some staples like rice and vegetables, many commodities remain costly, raising uncertainty among Nigerians about the official inflation figures, as they do not seem to translate into real economic relief.
Well, we are happy that that inflation dropping is by now on paper. It has not reflected to reality that we are seeing.
It's a good development. If this statistics is really what it is, like you said, I think we expect more, and I know that the government policies will make it happen.
I mean, giving palliative is not the issue. The issue is price control. The government should have a price control to control the price in the markets.
Check the rate at which people are indiscriminately increasing prices, because there are some things that are not even affected by this dollar increase, and yet before you go to the market today, something that you buy for 100 naira, you come the next day or probably next 2, 3, 4 hours, it's 150, it's 200. So
economic analysts suggest tackling the high cost of production, transportation and foreign exchange as crucial to slowing down inflation.
Agriculture is our mainstay in Nigeria, so we need to do more to make sure that it is mechanized and we have much more productivity by bringing more technology. Then another thing is our supply chain. I think we have major difficult issues in our supply chain. Remember, what you have in the farm or what you have, it must pass through the supply chain. And what are the components of this supply chain is the problem of transportation. And when we talk about transportation, we are expecting that by now, virtually all our trucks, all our commercial vehicles will be converted to CNG.
Given that the inflation rebasing now aligns with global best practices, it is expected that policymakers will use the updated data to adjust interest rates and direct policies and social interventions. In Abuja, Muplang Dakok.
Right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let me introduce our guests. You like to welcome to this program Dr. Ayo Anthony, Head of Prices Division, NBS, that's the National Bureau of Statistics. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good. We are also joined by Professor Ken Ife, no stranger to this program, a consultant and development economist. Prof.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. And we are also joined tonight by Dr. Samson Galadima Simon, CEO, ARC Economics and Data Limited. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, this is one topic where we do hope a lot of people will be interested in, and as you know, it's the program gets interactive at some point. When it's that time, we'll remind you of the process of the procedure. For now, let's begin to look at the issues. Yes, Nigeria's rebased consumer price index, the impact on the economy. We tried as much as possible to break it down in the earlier introduction, but let's start from the very basics. And Dr. Ayo Anthony, we turn to you. Not many get the hang of it. Rebased consumer price index. understanding what rebasing is. What is it all about in simple, everyday language?
Okay. Thank you very much. Consumer Price Index, which we call CPI, is an index that tracks changes in prices of goods and services consumed by household. It excludes investment goods. Now, CPI, as I've defined it, is a relative index. Relative in the sense that you are comparing prices in a given period with a base period. Relativity. Not just a relative index, it's also weighted. Weighted in the sense that you capture the relative expenditure of household on an item in the computation of CPI. So these two things I mentioned now, the adjustment of the base year or the price reference period, and also the adjustment of the weight, which we call relative expenditure, is all called CPI rebasing. When I say price reference period, for example, now in MBS or in Nigeria, before the rebase CPI, we were comparing prices in 2024 to price in 2009, meaning that 2009 was our price reference period or the base year. So rebasing means that you bring the base year closer to the current period so that the price change will reflect the current economic reality. That is one. Also, the second aspect of rebasing is bringing the current consumption pattern of people on board in the computation of this price change. When I say consumption pattern of people, that's what we call weight, or what we call relative expenditure. Before the rebasing in Nigeria, in current rebasing, our weight reference period was also 2009, meaning that we were using relative expenditure of items of 2009. And this weight we are talking about is dynamic. It changes with time. It's a function of income. It's a function of price change. It's a function of weather. It's a function of innovation. And all these variables I mentioned, they are highly volatile. They change with time. So rebasing is all about bringing the price reference period closer to the current period and bringing on board current consumption pattern. And also, if time permits, it also involves reviewing the methodology used in computing the index.
But in this case, the question of inflation will be thrown up pretty clearly, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Inflation is gotten from consumer price index. Without computing consumer price index, which called CPI, you cannot get inflation rates. Consumer price index only measures changes in prices. But the rate at which price changes is called inflation, if it is a positive change. So after we have computed CPI, so inflation, from your headline, you said something. We have what we call headline inflation. The headline inflation has two dimensions, year on year or month on month. So when you are talking of year on year inflation, is when you are comparing CPI of January 2025 to CPI of January 2024. That gives you year-on-year inflation rate. When you are comparing CPI of January 2025 with December 2024, the percentage changes in these two CPI give you month-on-month inflation rate.
Prof, there's always this argument in the public domain. Sometimes the figures that are churned out by relevant bodies and institutes and authorities like the Bureau of Statistics would seem sometimes at variance with the feelings and the thinking of the people. But in any case, we've also seen where those figures have at times been at variance with what an administration pushes out.
That's right. It does happen. But I think there's so many things to be admired in this particular exercise, because when you look at the new methodology that is being used, is so far away from what we have been, apart from the date component, the fact that this is 2009, this is 2000, the actual components, that the varieties of products that are used for this computation, is about 934 in the new version of COICOP. COICOP is the classification of consumption based on purpose. Compared to 740 varieties, obviously when you have a difference of almost 200, there are 200, either new additions or modified. So they are much more reflective of the reality of what we are experiencing. And then also the computational index being used and the way it's being used is no longer paper-based for the previous one. Imagine if you have thousands of people to interview to get information. Here is more digitized, which means it's real time. So the accuracy of these figures are now going to be upgraded by the new methodology being used. So I think there's something there. And then when we begin to interrogate the details, we will actually see even more things that have happened.
Well, we'll certainly do that. But let's come to Dr. Samson Simon, CEO of ARC Economics and Data Limited. And as a thing they say about statistics and data, they can, at any point in time, swing to indicate just who's churning out those data. Because sometimes the figures come out and it tends to give the impression like, oh, things are okay, while in reality, they may not be. And I mean, this is in terms of usage of data and statistics. For instance, you'd say inflation has slowed down for this period. While in the essence of it, the average person on the street is not interested in whether the rate of it has slowed down. He's asking, when will my 10 naira buy me the goods that it bought me 5 years ago? So.
Well, people are right to be concerned about the data. And even though the figures are showing that in December, headline inflation was 34.8%, and in January, it's showing 24.48%. The statistician general was very explicit. This does not mean that prices have come down.
Right.
It's just the method that has been changed. The base year has been changed. Instead of comparing prices now to 2009 prices, they are comparing prices with 2024 prices. And if you look at it, definitely because prices in 2009 were way lower than prices in 2024, so the difference now will be a little bit less. When you're comparing January 2025 with December 2024, is not going to be as volatile as much as when you're comparing with 2009. And mind you, globally, the ideal inflation rate is 2%. Global best practice is 2%. In Nigeria, we feel we cannot do 2%. We opted for 6 to 9%. And 24.48 is way higher than 6 to 9%. So we're still not yet out of the woods. So we're still in an environment where inflation is extremely high. It's not okay. If you look at food inflation in particular, is always leading. And Nigeria, if you look at the food security index, Nigeria is the worst place on earth when it comes to affordability of food. When it comes to availability, we are one of the worst places. So it's not yet the huru. There's still a long way to go. So there's nothing there to celebrate that prices are better. Prices are not better. All of us go to the market and we know what we experience on a daily basis. Prices have not come down. These are just statistics on paper. The figures are better, but in reality, the figures are still the same.
All right, we have a number of reports. Let's get this one from Lagos as we continue with tonight's program.
The recent rebasing of the Consumer Price Index has had an immediate impact on headline inflation. Experts say this move is in tandem with global best practice, as the IMF and other international agencies recommend a 5-year rebasing period. This move, respondents are confident, will allow for a more impactful economic planning that can be easily reviewed.
You don't want to be comparing prices, current prices, with prices that are as old as 6 years ago or probably even more. So the closer the base year the better and the more realistic is what you're measuring.
Economic experts who attributed the initial rise in figures to increase in price of food, transportation and energy explained that there is still much to be done to sustain the gains of the rebasing for it to have positive impacts on the average Nigerian.
We simply have to produce more food, make more food available and the prices affordable. For the prices to be affordable, we have to produce more, obviously. For the energy, there has to be a lot of lifestyle adjustment by people, and for industrial consumers, they have to consider cheaper alternative. There are alternatives which are already on the ground. CNG is a very good one that is being offered by the federal government.
The solution can be, one, is for the government to target what I call food security policy. If government invests a lot on the agricultural sector, then there will be improvement on the consumer price index. And another one is addressing the structural inflation, especially in the housing, transport and energy costs, even including the healthcare.
With the base year adjustment, economic experts believe this move will boost investors' confidence in the nation's economy, which will attract foreign investments. In Lagos, Joel Bukbola.
And now let's see our next report, which is from Kaduna.
Everyday items are becoming more and more affordable. According to new consumer price index data, the CPI, which measures the average change in price of goods and services, fell from 34.80% in December 2024 to 24.48% in January 2025, following the rebasing.
As far as food commodities are concerned, that has reduced, but other commodities manufactured and imported are still high. Despite the fact that prices also, exchange rate has improved of the naira. So we expect in the long run, it will impact on the pockets of the individual. But, that is different from what probably we will see immediately.
Yusuf Adamu and Christiana Nicholas, residents of Kaduna, are of the view that the decrease suggests a welcome easing of the cost of living for consumers.
Price of tomatoes has come down totally. The basket will not pass, the price of tomatoes will be 13,000, 14,000, 15,000, and now people are coming out and buying the tomatoes.
Pepper, everything have dropped down small. Before we cannot buy onions and we cannot buy tomato, but now it's better. In fact, everything is better now.
What will bring permanent relief is if inputs are made available, even if it's at subsidized rate to farmers. Perhaps with that, they can produce at a lower price. In the long run, if we want to really bring solution, we have to find a way of supporting our farmers so that they can also produce competitively.
Professor Yushua Ango says, rebasing of Nigeria's consumer price index offers potential for improved economic policy making. He maintained that the success hinges not just on the numbers, but also on the effective use of this improved information to create better economic outcomes for all Nigerians. In Kaduna, Adamu Sunday.
All right, back here in the studio, let's get back to Dr. Ayo Anthony. And what are the likely implications of this rebase CPI on government policies, especially monetary and fiscal policies?
Okay, thank you. Before I respond to that question, let me make a correction because of people listening to us. It's wrong to say inflation reduced by 10% January compared to December. No. The two CPI are not the same. December CPI is based on 2009 base year, 2009 weight reference period, 740 varieties of products. The computational methodology is not the same. The classification is not the same. Classification of December was called 1999 version, which has 12 divisions. The current rebase CPI has 934 varieties of item. It's not just additional 200. Out of that 740 varieties of item, it was only about 300 that are retained, meaning that we have about 500 varieties of new item in the basket. So it is wrong for people to say December 2024, inflation rate was 34.8 and it reduced in January to 24. No, the two are not comparable. Comparability will start in February when we compute another inflation rate using the same methodology. That's the first thing. Now, what will be the benefit of economic agent in this rebase CPI? It's not just the inflation rate alone. That's what we call weight, consumption pattern. It shows investment direction. In the OCPI basket, food has about 50% weight. But now, the weight of food is only 40%. Meaning that what people are spending on food relatively, not absolutely, has come down. Meaning that there are more items in the basket that are competing with food. Health is very important. Transportation is also important. Information and technology is also important. If you look at the 13 divisions now, you will see that expenditures on health have increased, meaning that government should pay attention to that sector. Also, relative expenditure of household on education also increased with higher magnitude, meaning that people are patronizing education higher than how it was in 2009. Attention should be placed on it. Because when demand is on the sector, don't be surprised if supply is not increased, there will be deficit in the supply. So it's not just the inflation rate that policymakers should look into. The consumption pattern also is also a policy-informed decision that they can make. Now on the inflation rate, yes, the inflation rate we are computing now reflects current inflationary pressure, which will help the monetary authority to take good decision in the adjustment in the monetary policy instrument. You can see central bank now has kept all these parameters constant. That's a good decision because general inflation is not sufficient to take a decision. At least the inflation rate should be looked into first, second, or third month. Let's look at the trend before decision is being taken. Also, private sector or investors as well, they are interested in this new rebate CPI because the inflation we are computing now is not inflation with excessive lag past price changes. It's showing the current price volatility. I can easily take decision to invest in Nigeria. I know the rate at which prices are fluctuating currently. So the risk of bringing my investment here, and when I'm taking it, the value will be eroded because the inflation figure is not definite. No, the inflation figure now is definite, accurate, and it meets global best practice.
Prof, another matter, I like to take things down to, as they say, to the man on the street. With all of this, there are more items in the basket, as he's just said. And so, and he's saying there's about 300 or so?
300 old, about 500
new that have been brought into it. Again, when you watch the trend, now I want to zero in on households consumption, for instance. It's evident that in many households, they've had to cut out certain goods and services. For instance, it's just said, what it shows is that while less money may have been spent on food, more is being spent on health. And another aspect, another way to look at it is it not possible that while even spending more on health, the drop in spending on food might not necessarily be to increase what is being spent on health, but as a result of having to cut out many, basic foods.
That's right, actually. And actually, one thing that I also noticed in relation to this is that even though in that number one, food and non-alcoholic beverages, which was weighted 50, that has now come down to 40. Actually, one of the things that was removed there is food consumed outside your home. So they now recognize food consumed outside your home as part of restaurants and accommodation services, whether na mama put or doesn't matter, Hilton Hotel, it is outside your home. So to a layman, you may think, oh, the food is spending, money is spending on food has gone down, when the classification has actually taken those ones out completely to go and increase the restaurants. But there were also things like what's it called again? The insurance and financial services that were not even giving zero, but they now have to increase, And then, even if you look at some of the technology services also that increase, look at the rate at which we are using mobile money, all that stuff. You don't go to bank anymore, and you are doing. So some of those have been picked up to increase their weight in the overall description and what have you.
Okay. Well, the last time Nigeria's consumer price index was rebased, as you said, was 2009. Why would it be so long before you do another? Are we expecting that 2025 now will wait perhaps till 2040?
It seems so, considering where we're coming from. 2009, 2024, 15 years. So using that, if you're extrapolating, maybe until 2040. But the MB has made it abundantly clear that they should have done this way earlier than now. The global best practice, as proposed by United Nations Statistical Commission, is 5 years. And we should have been doing this every 5 years, change the weight every 5 years, the weight index, change the base price, the base year for the price, the base, the year for the weight. At present, for the weight is 2023, for the price is 2024, and I think I give them kudos because it's not really easy. It requires a lot of resources which they may not have access to, and this data is as robust as they come because it was not just done by MBS, the World Bank, the IMF, the Central Bank, the United Nations, all of them were co-opted. So it's very authoritative, and like you rightly mentioned, people should not get confused with the fact that inflation has come down by more than 10 percentage points. Inflation has not, prices have not come down. All of these are lived experiences. We know that prices have not come down. So it's just that we are comparing apples with oranges. So there's a big difference when it comes to that.
One thing I always worry about in terms of statistics and data collection, for instance, is the way that we do it in this part of the world, and where most people have a lot of misgivings about whether we're using authentic data. A point in cases, the question of population. All kinds of figures are flying around, 200 million, 250 million, you hardly know what to use in determining a lot of things, and this is a serious worry. Yes, there are attempts to have at least an accurate head count and know what Nigeria's population actually is. Now, do all of these have any impact on when you do this?
Yeah, thank you. That's what we call data integrity and data quality. It's just like what we call input-output analysis. If you want a good output, you have quality data. In MBS, we have quality checks before data will be used for analysis. For example, prices data that we use to compute inflation rate through CPI. We have enumerators across all the 36 states and FCT. Just like Prof said, before we were using paper to collect these prices, and we know the drawback of that mechanism method. But now we use CAPI device, using what we call survey CTO application. This survey CTO application, if I go to Wuse Market now to collect the prices of food items, as I'm collecting the price from the respondents, the price goes straight to the server with the information, geo information of the seller. So meaning that an enumerator cannot just sit in his or her house and begin to fill fake prices. Because if that is done, it will, if apart from that, the application has what called price range. If the price you are inputting is outside the range, it will flag it. So those are some of the control measures we put in place to ensure that the prices we use to compute inflation reflect true market condition. Also for the rebate CPI, the expenditure data we use for the rebasing, also follow the same due process. We cover over 22,000 households in Nigeria, not individual. 22,000 households. And this household were examined for 12 months, and data quality check was put in place to ensure that the expenditure we reported or we used to compute the relative expenditure weight is genuine, is correct, is qualitative and correct. So in terms of data, quality check are put in place to ensure that the data we use reflect what is happening in the economy.
Yeah, in terms of your question about the population, the accuracy of the population, this is statistics. You don't have to interview 220 million people. So whether there are 200 million or 230 million, it doesn't really matter. What happens is that they get statistical, they use, we have descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So they use inferential statistics so that the integrity of the data is representative of the population. So there's a minimum number of data, and then the randomness of how it is collected, and then the other dimension that there is a geophysical dimension to it. So it is going to be very accurate. And there are even, I've asked the DG many questions about internal consistency of the set of questions they're asking. He assured me on that. I said, how about self-retest stability? He assured me of that. Has the construct validity? He assured me of that. These are statistical techniques that you actually use to ensure integrity of the data that you are collecting and the randomness of it. It's not like everybody goes to market and gets the data. You could get it from restaurants, you can get it from so many different locations. And it's not everybody go out on Monday to go and collect. How about people who don't go to market on Monday? So it's randomized. And then eventually they follow a normal distribution that represents the population. It's like election, when you're collecting elections, you don't get it from everybody. You get a sample, but they are well randomized that you get an accurate description.
Let me ask Dr. Anthony to explain this for us, and in terms of figures that we see from the NBS, for instance, talking about urban inflation, says at 26.09%, and rural inflation at 22.15. Why is this?
Okay, thank you. We all know that price is highly volatile in urban compared to rural because of the purchasing power. And apart from that, more people purchase more in urban than rural. Rural is more of subsistence economy. I have what I eat, I produce I get from the farm. So in terms of purchases, there are more purchases in urban compared to rural. So that is why inflation figure in urban is always more than rural. And this is another advantage to Nigerian CPI. Many countries don't produce CPI across sector. When I say sector, urban, rural. But in Nigeria, we know that people are living in structure, urban, rural, and the price movement in these two structures are not the same. So we need to bring this price movement on board in computation of the headline inflation. The headline inflation, which you call all-item index, is bringing together both urban and rural. Somebody said something in your report that inflation in Lagos can be 40%, then Enugu can be 30%. But the headline is not speaking to the two. The headline inflation is the average of all the states and all the sector. So you don't expect headline inflation to be equal to the same thing in Lagos and in Imo. No. The headline inflation is the average price changes across all the 36 states and FCT. However, we have urban national, rural national, we still have state inflation.
Well, yes. In relation to urban and rural, there is the factor of transportation. The fact that you now have to transport that goods from rural, especially food, to urban area, that transportation cost exacerbates. Secondly, the consumption of the food in the rural area takes a different form. When it enters urban, there could be more value addition. Restaurants will cook them. So you have more things that happen to that also contribute to the differential that you see. Then you count on the mobile phone, you get more intense use of it in the urban area because there's more service there and people, they understand, and young people keep drifting there where they can enjoy those services. Even energy, they consume them more because of their availability. And rural people just pay for energy they never get. So that kind of thing.
Well, I was going to say, when you look at all of this, looking at all the figures, in terms of comparing to periods before, well, we've put aside 2009. Let's say, what is the trend that we see between, for instance, 2023 and now? If you take these figures, well, of course, now we know that whatever you're churning out, whatever you churned out in 2023 was arrived at on a different so it might be difficult to put an answer to what, because I was going to say, what does it show? Does it show that there is a slowing of the economy or otherwise? But then again, that's the challenge of having.
If you ask this question next month,
all right.
Next time next month you will get some positive
Let me
answers.
say something on that as the price expert for the Bureau. 24.4% inflation rates is not a small figure when you are comparing 2025 to 2024. It means that the inflationary pressure is still there. To refer to your question, the trend in 2020 to 2024, you know, 2023 we have a lot of shocks. Fuel subsidy removal, exchange rate unification, and all those things are price influencing policies. And those policies are still in place. So the price movement, the trajectory of price movement in 2023 extended to 2024. So that is why after the rebase, we still have about, if you go to other countries, when they rebase, countries that don't have high inflationary pressure, you see coming to maybe 10%, 7%. So this 24%, I want Nigerians to know, it's not that prices or inflationary pressure have come down. It's even relatively high when you are comparing to just a year different. And you're having 24 points. The only thing is that it shows. And another thing I want Nigerians to know is this. From your report, prices of food items have started coming down gradually. You could see when they say bag of rice, tomato, farm produce, especially farm produce, they are coming down. So don't be surprised. All things being equal, the inflationary pressure may start easing down over time. Because you know, food has almost 40%.
Yes, which is
whatever happened to food has a greater multiplier effect on the inflation we are computing. So I can say the thing may start easing down, all things being equal.
Which hardly ever is the case. Because there are other pressures.
Yes.
Not the least energy, which takes away whatever savings you have.
Even health as well, transportation. And apart from that, our food produce in Nigeria is not just only farm produce. Manufactured food, imported food, their prices have not subsided. They are still on the high side. So people are saying because farm produce is coming down, so the inflation may lie. No.
You still have processed food
have import elements.
That's
and
right.
you know that exchange rate is still relatively on the high side.
Well,
So that is...
A lot of rural folks will tell you they've got little or nothing to do with imported processed food, because even what used to be the middle class that, you know, had a taste for that is almost totally gone now. And there's been, most importantly, a change in consumption patterns.
No, without a doubt. But you asked one question about monetary policy implication. You know, I had so many debates just before the MPC sat, and I did recognize that one of the reasons that was driving the tightening and hiking of the monetary policy rate was the perceived difference. You know, we were on negative real interest rate, which is one of the ECOWAS macroeconomic convergence criteria. If your inflation is higher than the interest rate, then the bank is likely to keep going up until it meets, because you are on negative interest rate. But now that the statistics have suggested that it is 24.5%, is now below the 27.5% of the monetary policy rate. So it's difficult now. It's difficult to convince people why you should go up when there's an inflection in that. So they have to now stay steady, but not come down for a little while, because there's so many things happening externally. You don't know what will happen next month with Donald Trump and all his oil policy and all that stuff. So it was important to just hold and see what happens. Just give it a month or two to see which direction to go. There was a very important one that it actually arrested the sharp rises in the monetary policy rate. And then, of course, the banking sector will adjust to, and all other things that are monetary will take a cue from holding the rates. And investment is still coming. Foreign portfolio investment is still coming. But also the treasury bills dropped from 22.8% down to 18%. Again, that is a benefit that we have seen. Yeah. It has forced things to start, this steam is coming off.
The change, can I say something?
Yes, please.
All right. The change in the consumption pattern is one of the reasons for rebasing, because the consumption habits of Nigerians in 2009 and our consumption habits now are not the same. And the rebasing has captured this. And if you look at, for example, even in the weight, the more important a particular item is becoming, the more weight is being attached. For example, education and healthcare, they have the weightage they have doubled. And then if you look at ICT, communication, information and communication, it has multiplied maybe times 5. And all of us will agree that between 2009 and 2024, a lot of things have happened, and the way we consume ICT is not the same now when compared to 2009. So basically, that's the essence of the rebasing, to capture these changes in consumption, to update the items. We were talking about 740. We're doing 934 now, and not just adding almost 200. We changed some of the items in the 740, and even the weight of the item. So a lot of things have happened, and even the economic trends have changed, and all these have largely been captured by the base CPI.
Well, at this one, we'll take a short break. When we return, there'll be more on the CPI, and of course the phone lines hopefully would be open, which means you can join in the conversation in the studio. So stay with us. We'll be back shortly.
From the Atlantic across the savannah to the Sahara, we rise, the land of the free, we know they tire. We dream great, our spirit is undying.
Resilient, rooted like palm tree, we swear in color, we stand down in demand, we make solutions, we ignite passion, yeah. Diversity is unique, we have more than just a nation. We are Nigeria, standing in unity, we know they carry love. We are Nigeria,
The Real Nigerian. Brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, NOA.
The federal government of Nigeria warns vandals of national assets, electricity transmission towers, cables, and other facilities to desist from this act of sabotage. Vandalism is a serious crime, punishable under the law. Vandalizing electrical equipment will affect millions of Nigerians, including your loved ones. Remember that national assets belong to all of us, hence the need to protect them. Report all cases of suspicious movement around electrical facilities to security agencies. When you see something, say something. This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation in collaboration with the National Counter-Terrorism Center, NCTC, Office of the National Security Advisor.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. This segment, as we said, the phone lines will be open. You can join in the conversation. The numbers to call will be on your screen. We always encourage you every Tuesday, if you're calling in and your call gets through to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And we also encourage you to go straight to the point, keep it short and simple so others can also get on the platform. Importantly too, don't bother too much about the greetings. Just a simple hello would do. Right, we'll start off with another of our reports. This one is from Oka.
Rebasing of Nigeria's consumer price index is a crucial step towards enhancing the accuracy and effectiveness of economic policy making. By providing a more reliable measures of inflation, policymakers can now make better informed decisions, address inflationary pressures, and promote sustainable economic growth. Ultimately, this new framework holds the potential to drive positive change and strengthen Nigeria's position in the global economy.
Economic improve or economic growth. There are two factors that is at play: monetary policy and fiscal policy. The monetary policies sitting with the CBN, vis-a-vis with the fiscal policy sitting with the government in power, which is largely the policy of the government in power. These are the two things that have direct impact on the economy. The two work pari passu.
It's obvious that it will help the inflation statistics. Imagine before the rebasing, the inflation rate is over 35%, which depicts Nigeria as economic poverty capital of the world. With the current exchange rate compared with that of 2024 rates, it is less than 10%. And makes economic policies easier to manage than when it was at a runaway inflation statistics.
A section of people in Awka metropolis say the actual cost of living remains high and disposable income are shrinking, noting that the factors accredited to the decrease of some commodities is as a result of some government policies.
Sectors also helps in bringing down the inflation in the sense that the area where those commodities, which we, the final consumers, consume, the Nigerian government are trying to improve the security that is going on that area, based on bringing providing more security to them, encouraging the farmers to go back to farm and cultivate their goods, and it helps in large production of.
Price of fuel comes down. Things in the market will come down, but now some are still the same, while some of it is still increasing in the market.
The base of the consumer price index was done 14 years ago. Stakeholders are optimistic that it will improve the economy and reduce inflation in the country. In Oka, Onome, Okadibo.
All right, back in the studio, I think it was Dr. Samson Simon who talked about more production, particularly in the area of food, which for him would be just the only way to counter the question of inflation, food inflation, for instance, and canvassed more production. Yes, there is an improvement in the environment as to, encourage more agricultural production. But again, the whole issue is that while one measure helps to improve a situation, you find that there are other subsistent factors which seem to take away whatever gains you have made in one area.
Correct.
And it begins to make it extremely difficult. For instance, people would farm more produce. We have talked about the use of electronic banking systems. Everything now, you don't have to go too far away, and you can, use of ICT, especially in financial transactions. But those rates are going up again, which might further discourage people from using them.
Agri-tech technology and others, yes.
The overarching problem, the overarching driver of inflation still remains food. I know the government has put in a lot of efforts. Sadly, we are still not yet out of the woods. If you look at food inflation, is still higher than the headline, is still higher than the core. And one reason for that is because of our mechanization. If you look at our tractorization, our horsepower per hectare is one of the worst. And it's not just about throwing money at the problem. We have tried that with Anchor Borrowers scheme and so on. We have not actually seen results. So there's a need for us to be intentional about everything. According to the World Economic Forum, Nigeria is the worst when it comes to the percentage of the income that is being used for food. Almost 60% of the income being used for feeding. There's no place on earth where it's that high. So that means we need to give agriculture the importance it deserves. If you look at the last budget, we're talking about 800 billion for agriculture in a budget of 55 trillion. If you look at the Maputo declaration, it says at least 10%. And if we are the worst on earth when it comes to affordability of food, that means we have to give it all the importance. And like I said, I'm beginning to sound like a broken record. Some people mistake this to mean throwing money at the problem. We will never have results. We have to be intentional about every single time that is being spent on agriculture. It's about improved breeds. It's about better farming, land tenure system. It's about engaging able-bodied people. And it's not about asking all Nigerians to go to the farm. There is no country on earth that has become food secure because 70% of the population is engaged in agriculture. So we need to move away from using crude tools like hoes and cutlasses. For a country of over 200 million people, we can never get to feed ourselves. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think the government needs to wake up to its responsibility. And I'm not saying the government alone. There's a need for enabling environment for private investors too, for everybody to, all hands to be on deck to get the desired results, because the extent of the food insecurity in Nigeria is very scary. And some of us are alarmed that we may not be giving it the importance it deserves. We know that's not the only problem, like you rightly mentioned. Transportation is also an issue. We're talking about power. We're talking about many other things. All of them are important. But, food is the most basic thing. And when we cannot afford it, it is a big indictment for us as a nation. That means we have not even gotten the basics. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there.
I think we probably have our first caller on the line from Jos. Hello?
Yes, Hussaini from Jos.
Yes, Hussaini, go ahead.
Good evening. Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Cyril, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Hussaini.
Yes, yeah. You see, the issue of the price of foodstuff in the market. If you can remember last year, by this time, the situation in the country is that during the harvest time, usually we experience a low price in terms of food items. By this time last year, all things being equal, the food of a measure of corn was about 350 naira or thereabout. A measure of a rice, which is the local one, was about 500 naira, 500 and above. But this year, you can see that even at this moment, it's still 600 naira. And what I want to say is this: we should not celebrate this yet. And once if the price is as low as it is during this particular harvest season, by the time we get to the planting season, that is when the price of some of those foodstuffs skyrocketed. So I think we should wait a little bit. That is my suggestion. The issue of food insecurity, you see some of those food, there are places that are farming seriously. You see places like Adamawa, you see places like Taraba State, and part of Plateau and Benue. Some of these people, we farm a lot. There are a lot of food there. And I'm still surprised that we don't have enough in the country. Why? Because some of these people between our borders, they will come right away from Mali, Niger, Chad, and other places to come and pack the food here that we are buying, we are selling, and they will take it away. If you look at the currency now, even the Benin Republic currency now is even better than our naira. Therefore, they can come and buy it at any cost and take it away. So we should work on our border. We have to do something about our food stuff. So that's my contribution.
Right. Thank you very much, Hussaini.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, Prof, you want to respond to that?
I do recognize the challenges we have with food insecurity. But we also need to accept that there are some measurable increase in resources that are being deployed. It was 400,000 metric tons of fertilizer. Now it's 1.2 million metric tons of fertilizer that was distributed free. Yesterday, I accompanied the Minister of Agriculture to National Seed Council, where 2,000 tractors were all laying there, and the plan was by next month they will release those 2,000 tractors from Belarus. And of course, they have another arrangement that is coming on from John Deere. And they also accompanied the minister again to Ekiti somewhere with leading them to see one company harvesting 2,000 hectares of cassava. And you know, there are action being taken, but that does not mean that is Uhuru yet. It of course is not. But I have one thing to add. You know, I discuss this CPI every time it comes out, every week, every month. And one of the challenges we have is being able to pigeonhole the role of energy and which kind of food. Is it imported food? Is it the food? So when you do core inflation is all indices minus the energy and the food.
Farm produce.
And their food. Okay. But when you look at them, you also see imported food in the food basket and also in the core. But now they have actually dissociated. You couldn't even say what energy, exactly what role energy plays. Now you've removed the energy, we can now pinpoint any issue around the energy, whether it's renewable or that. We can descend to that depth to say, yeah, this is what energy is doing to transport, this is what energy is doing to household. Then we'll come to imported food. They all have different indices now, and it's so easy now to narrow. Even services has an index. Goods have an index. It's so easy now to pinpoint accurately where the trouble is, and then we can direct policy to that, to deal with it.
Okay. We have Umar on the line, if he's still there, from Birnin Kebbi.
Hello, hello.
Right, Umar Anache, go ahead. Good evening.
I'm Umar Anache, calling from Birnin Kebbi.
Yes, go ahead.
You see, this price of food, they say, is reducing. It is quite okay reducing if you compare it with the last 2 months, when the price is high. Now the price is reducing. But what makes it reduced? I think food available in the market is not food affordable on the table. There are two different things there, affordability and availability in the market. The civil servant, for example, they say they had minimum wage of about 70,000. But I'm a federal civil servant. I cannot tell you that that minimum wage is implemented. That is the reducing, the purchasing power in the hands of people is reduced and is reducing. So if government want to, change the price of things, they should increase the purchasing power in the hands of people. Equally, the government should reduce the cost of energy, the cost of transportation, and the cost of telecom, all accumulated together, make any reduction in terms of food reduction useless. May God continue to bless our country. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yes. Well,
the purchasing power being eroded is largely due to a high inflationary rate. High inflation erodes purchasing power, and your capacity to buy things is completely gone. And despite the increase in minimum wage, if you adjust for inflation, you adjust for exchange rate, you realize that you are far worse off despite that. And mainly because the value of the naira has come down. If you look at it before this administration came on board, the official exchange rate was less than 500. We're talking about 1,500 now. So it's way cheaper for us to export because the naira has come down in value. It's cheaper to export than for us to import. And sadly, even for the food that we don't have enough, the farmers who prefer to sell to those other neighboring countries, they tend to make more money that way than actually selling to Nigerians. And that's actually compounding our food security problem. So there's a need to fix the economy. A lot of things need to be done. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Okay. Well, just keep the calls coming through. Try to get another call in here. Well, again, the question of the indices which led to this rebasing and what it portends, what it actually tells, is how we started off in the first place by saying, for the public, the general public, the first thing is that, yes, we may well be seeing these figures, and like you have explained, it doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. The other aspect which a caller talked about, and which Dr. Simon has just also mentioned, the fact that Umar Adachi said affordability is not the same as availability. And it's been identified that people from the neighboring countries come and ship out these food items. The individual farmer thinks about prosperity. He needs to make more for himself. And it's easier to sell to one who's willing to pay more than here. See? But let's take this call from Nladi from Lagos, and then we'll return to you to comment on that. Hello. Do we have Nladi on the line?
Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. Go on.
Yeah. Today I want to talk about is one of your man mentioned concerning the education that is going high as well. And if you look at that area, government needs to do something about the public school, because the private school is really going high every day and day, every 10%. And if government is doing something serious about public school, then it will collapse the private school. It's too high. It's because government is not doing anything about the public school. And that is why the private school continues to do overdue. Please, they need to do something in that area. If public school is functioning well with good teachers, good classroom, and reduce the number of students in the classroom instead of having up to 100 in the classroom, have like the same thing that the private schools are doing. Then you see people will withdraw their students from the private school back to the public school. And somebody will come to be a governor while his children are not going to public school. Somebody will come to be a minister of education while his children are abroad schooling. Somebody will come to be a president of Nigeria while his children or himself have never taken school in Nigeria before. How would that work? University will go on strike for how long? Because if their children are there, all these things will not happen. Please, they need to look at that area as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's my contribution.
Okay. We'll just relate this to the question of the CPI and what it's showing us. We've talked about health and how the trend is more expenditures going on in health. Now he's brought in education. And we see how is that reflected in the figures we're seeing now. More going to education or less?
Okay. Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Now, I used to say this in any forum I found myself about inflation in Nigeria. Inflation in Nigeria is not a demand-side issue. Inflation in Nigeria is a supply-side factor. Look at the caller from, is it Kebbi?
Yes.
That said border. It's a supply-side factor. Not that the food in Nigeria being produced is not enough, but there's a diversion. What is the interest? Profit. Does it mean they sell the food in Nigeria, they will not make the expected profit? The answer maybe is no. That's why they are diverting it to another country where their interest can be maximized. Maybe because of the exchange rate or the value of Naira is a factor. That's what I would say about that, because if government doesn't know the cause of inflation, in economics theory, the cause of inflation determines the solution to the inflation. Yeah. Before you can know the solution to an inflation, you must know the cause of that inflation. Is it a cost-push inflation? Is it a demand-pull inflation? Is it structural inflation? Is it inflation that is caused by excess money? That's why anytime monetary authority in Nigeria adjusts all this monetary policy rate, I used to say, inflation in Nigeria may not be a monetary phenomenon. Yeah, it's not the issue of excess money chasing few goods. It's the supply, inadequate supply of goods compared to the demand. Now, the person from Lagos, I said it earlier, the consumption pattern we got from the 2023 Nigeria Living Standard Survey and 2024 Survey of Rare Item gave us the new consumption pattern. From that consumption pattern, policymakers have a lot to do. As I said, health increased by more than 100%, meaning that a lot of money is being spent on health, meaning that people have health challenges. The sector needs to be visited. Education is highly inelastic now. That's why you see, even if the private school is 100% increase, people will still patronize because we know the importance of education. Another sector that is very important that has greater weight is what we call restaurant and accommodation. The weight before the rebates was about 1.2, but now it's about 12.5. Look at the huge gap. Why? Meal away from home was initially in Division 1. Average workers or non-worker eat outside their homes. And expenditure on this has also increased astronomically. Why? Price of food in the buka or restaurant or in all these structured food seller have increased. So meaning that that sector needs to be focused on as well. Another thing in that division that make that division to increase is accommodation. Accommodation is not just living in a hotel. The accommodation we are talking about include accommodation of our students in school, hostel, from primary school to university. These two changes made that division to spark up like that. Many of our students today, they pay a lot of money on accommodation. Maybe that government should pay attention to that as well. Are our students vying in school? How is their living condition in school? That sector needs to be also visited. As I said, people should not just focus on 24%. The consumption pattern also have a lot of information for government, for household, and for investors.
Okay. Let's get this other call from Uyo. Philip is calling in. Hello, Philip. Philip, are you there?
Hello?
Hello, Philip from Uyo.
Hello?
Hello.
I'm hearing you.
Yes, go right ahead, Philip.
What I'm suggesting is that one, if there's any increase in salary, they should not be publishing it. Hello?
Go ahead, Philip. Are you still there, Philip?
They should not be publishing in the network. So that, when they're publishing in the network, I'm hearing you.
Yes, yeah, we're listening to you.
Then they will increase the business, they will increase their businesses.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Philip. He ties the announcement of wages to inflationary trend. But there are lots of people who have debunked that and said, look, there are sectors in the Nigerian economy that are paid out huge sums. That hasn't affected it.
That's
I
true.
mean, take for instance, a lot of money goes around in politics. That has not
affected prices.
So how?
Absolutely. I need to tackle one issue about inflation. What we have in Nigeria is called stagflation. And that is the most complicated form of inflation. And all the inflationary factors are active in Nigeria. We have demand-pull inflation. And because 33 trillion was printed, and that money has nothing to do with productivity, and so you are actually paying inflation tax for having that huge sums that are being sucked away. You have structural inflation because you have energy prices jumping up, you have electricity going up, you have transportation costs in consequence going up. So all the input manufacturers need and consume have gone up. That is cost push inflation. You have imported inflation because we are still, our appetite to import has not abated. We are still an import-dependent economy with a forex that you've seen how it is playing out, is imported inflation. And then the last one my colleague keeps on talking about is what I call cross-border demand pull inflation. What it is that 10 years ago, I'm from ECOWAS Commission. We usually carry our naira to all parts of ECOWAS, and 1 naira buys 3 francs CFA. But now, 1 naira buys you 0.7, which means 80% devaluation of the money of naira compared to the. If they have this kind of devaluation, that Nigerian things are 8 times cheaper, why would they don't need to go to farm anymore. They just buy your food, dry it, and export it. It's cheaper for them. And even if you double the price of that food, they will still buy it because it's like being 40% cheaper instead of 80% cheaper. But Nigerians cannot afford our food at those 7 frontier states because the moment you add transportation costs and bad road, taking you 3 days to bring it down to the south, the price will be out of this world. How can you stop it? There's nothing you can do except to focus on producing more and processing at world level. Because ECOWAS Treaty says free movement of goods, and we're signatory to the treaty. We're even the chairman of the ECOWAS. We couldn't do that.
Can I add?
Yes, please.
Inflation, according to Milton Friedman, arguably the greatest monetary economist, inflation is always monetary in nature. Of course, structural factors and other factors exacerbate that. But if you look at it critically, like what happened in 2024, the central bank was very hawkish in its stance and aggressively hiking interest rates, but there was a disconnect because the more they were hiking rates, the more money supply was climbing. So there was a disconnect somewhere. And some of us feel it's because the fiscal side and the monetary side are working at cross purposes. They are not actually synergizing, because no matter how aggressively you pursue contractionary monetary policy, if the fiscal side is expansionary, they will cancel it eventually. So there's a disconnect. And the monetary factor is there, because money supply reached unprecedented levels last year. So that is fueling inflation, apart from the structural factors.
All right, we have Abdullahi from Bauchi on the line. Abdullahi, hello.
Good morning, all.
Yes, go right ahead.
What I want to say is, actually we are observing and witnessing some change in price. I can see some prices on some, especially foodstuff, are slightly coming down. But the points are all the contrary.
Oh dear. Abdullah, are you still there? Well, I think we must have lost that call. Well, we can encourage you to call back. Perhaps the connections would be better then. I think that that call was interrupted. Somehow we lost the call, but not to worry, Abdullah, you may still call back. There's still enough time for you to call back and hopefully get through so we can get your contribution on that. Well, back here in the studio, again, we go back to the issue of inflation measurement and economic planning. From what you've said so far, the authorities should be looking at the figures that are coming out and determine where they should focus on in terms of the interventions that could ameliorate the dire situations that Nigerians are in currently. But it's always been the function of government, hasn't it, that you do this, and it's with an eye to improving the lot of the people. But there are some who say Nigeria's situation defies all known theories and concepts, and therefore we may need to look somewhere else, or somehow, inwards, or some other way to be able to get things running. What do you say about that?
Well, I mean, that's what I explained to you, that stagflation is just a very complicated one. You can't predict. If anybody tells you, oh, stop this enormous supply, it won't do it. There are 4 different ones, and they're all running across purposes. But I tell you one thing that can help. Rail line was a very unifying factor in Nigerian economy before all this breakdown. Rail is the most economical, most effective way of transporting heavy goods, produce along long distances. And because you don't have functional rail moving up, down the country, the cost of transporting food and many things looks intractable. I tell you, if you look at one rail line that will have 30 coaches and each coach can have 30 tons, multiply it by 30 is 1,000 tons. It moved in 2 hours or 3 hours from one end to the other. Count how many lorries and trucks, how many trailers will carry that to go through which road, for how many days. The goods would have perished by the time they get from Sokoto to Port Harcourt. And then with all the stoppages and the roads are bad, that is so difficult to manage until we get our act together on rail lines.
All right. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want to come back to inflation in Nigeria. I said something earlier. From what you said, it seems as if most economic theories are not working in Nigeria. That's what I call theory adaptation and theory adaptation. You bring it where the theory is formulated is full of assumptions around theories and the environment also. Where you are bringing a theory to Nigeria, we don't just adopt the theory. It needs to be adapted. Adaptation means, in the course of implementing what the theory says, consider your peculiarity. And that has been the problem. The peculiarity, for example, now economic theory says, if inflation is on the high side and is caused by excess money, increase the monetary policy rate. We have increased monetary policy rate in Nigeria. What happened? I do tell people, monetary policy will work in an environment where the financial system is formal and well structured. That is where monetary policy will work. Look at Nigeria. There are a lot of informal financial services going on. My people are saying 22 trillion money supply. Where is that money supply? Is that money chasing few goods available, or the money is stuck somewhere? The money that is in circulation is the one monetary policy rate will mop up. But the money that is not in circulation, that is kept in the sock away, that is kept somewhere, monetary policy cannot bring it out. Money that is not in a structured financial system cannot be mopped up by monetary policy. Meaning that in the course of using monetary policy to control inflation in Nigeria, we must consider the environment. The money that is not in structured financial institution, maybe all this institutional, informal something, they cannot be affected by monetary policy. Monetary policy can only affect money that is in commercial bank, merchant bank, all this formal structured financial institution. But an environment where there are a lot of money in the economy that is not in this structured financial institution, how can monetary policy affect that one? That is what I want to say. And before you can control inflation using monetary policy, as I've said, what is the cause of that inflation? I am the compiler of the figure. I don't need to be talking about what is causing it. What is the solution? My own is to talk about this is the figure compiled. These are the reasons why the figure is going up. These are the reasons why the figure is coming down. But I'm talking as an economist now. I'm not talking as an MBS, sir. As an economist, this is my own opinion about inflation in Nigeria. If you want to bring inflation down, what are the causes? The causes determine the solution. Not just increasing monetary policy rate, increase cash reserve ratio, increase liquidity rate. All those increments and adjustments, have they abated inflation in Nigeria? Meaning, something is wrong. Another problem with monetary policy is this, is full of lag. Yes, I'll call inside lag and outside lag. Before you say you want to use monetary policy to affect a macroeconomic variable, time is a factor. And monetary policy does not affect economic variable directly. It affects indirectly. It's fiscal policy that affects target economic variable directly. So that's why fiscal policy at times looks more relatively efficient compared to monetary policy. Thank you.
Right. Well, yes. Okay. Well, we still expect one or two more callers to come in on the matter and devising an appropriate method of tackling these challenges. Well, we've just had Dr. Ayo Anthony. Let's hear you on this as well. All the theories don't seem to be working, when we can easily point to other climes where these theories are working. So what is it? What is in the Nigerian climb that rebuffs almost all attempts? And easily you can see the words, those things that are affecting the rate of inflation and all that. We talked about power. Someone made mention of that. Now, despite all efforts that have been thrown in, the challenges seem intractable. If it's about investment in the sector, if that is being addressed, then you have the question of vandalism. That one too goes on. And all kinds of other things as well.
Well, a lot of things are responsible, but sometimes too we live in denial, in the sense, like Prof mentioned, the abuse of ways and means. We know that the monetary reason for inflation is heavily there, and you know that when you increase the money supply, that definitely fuels inflation. And then you go up ahead to print tens of trillions of naira to give to the authorities to spend in not so productive way, and then the law states that you should not exceed a certain limit, you just didn't consider that, you understand. And we're still feeling the impact of that, because you just imagine printing tens of trillions of naira and then pouring into the economy. And monetary policy has long and variable impact. We might not have seen the impact immediately when the trillions were being pumped, but up to tomorrow, we're still recovering from that. And up to tomorrow, this money has not been paid back because it was securitized when it shouldn't even be securitized. So that's one of the reasons. And then, the Ukrainian war also compounded our problem. So we need to really face the realities and try to be honest about getting solutions instead of pretending as if problems are not there when they're clearly there, and some of them are self-inflicted, like printing trillions, tens of trillions, and pumping them into the economy without caring about the consequences of such an action. And that's basic economic theory.
Yeah,
so we have to tell ourselves the truth.
And also, GDP was growing at about 3%. Money supply was growing at 13%, 10% more than the normal growth in the economy. That is money supply. And then also over 80% of that money that is in circulation are not in the banking system.
Okay.
So that affects the transmissibility of monetary policy.
Well, let's try and get this call in from Matthew, who's calling in from Abuja. Hello, Matthew, if you're there, go ahead. Matthew, if you're there, go ahead, please. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, if that's Matthew, go on with your question or comment.
Hello? Okay, I can just hear me. I want to comment on one thing. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, I want to comment on one thing, one issue.
Go ahead.
Yes, concerning our mindset. The mindset of people in Nigeria. Yes, that's the most important thing. The way people behave, the way people treat each other. Hello?
Yes, Matthew.
That's the major problem.
Oh dear. I'm afraid you keep pausing in the middle of your sentences. That makes it extremely difficult for us to get the idea of what exactly you're saying. You want to go through that one more time so we can get you? All right. Well, unfortunately, we couldn't get get a lot from that. But as we prepare to wind down on this, let's go back to this one more time. All along, the question of rebasing had to do with the economy generally, and how Nigerians felt at the time the Nigerian economy was rebased, and then the country ended up being the largest economy in the continent. Now, there are Nigerians who have asked for a similar thing, not just the consumer price index, to tell us exactly where the country is at this time. Is it still the largest economy in Africa? I'm going to say it's been overtaken. Yes, probably.
Look, I keep saying, look, Nigeria's GDP, the official GDP, is dependent on, if you look at the magnitude of, like this one that they did now, they announced today, our GDP is, for this quarter, is 78 trillion. So say like 78 trillion multiplied by about 4, if you hold some for 4 quarters. That should be about 300 and something trillion. But you have to divide this by the exchange rate. The moment you have to divide with the exchange rate, what used to be 500 billion comes down to 200 billion. Then it may go up to 220, then it comes down to 2. That's what is going to be swinging. But the GDP of purchasing power parity was still number one in Africa, with $1.28 trillion. And that is based on a international price of value of dollar that may sometimes coincide, may be lower, may be higher, but it shows an accurate description of the size of this economy. As the naira value keeps on going up, the naira value of our GDP has not come down. It's been going up constantly over the years, going up. Is this one, that mess caused by forex rate, that is making us look like a joke? But in terms of our purchasing power parity, is over $1.28 trillion. So those who really want to invest in the economy know that whatever this figure tells us, the real thing we know that when 200 and something million Nigerians are having so many chewing gums, are having so many, they know, and they will invest their money in your country. Not this thing that dances up and down.
Okay. When President Tinubu said he wants Nigeria to be $1 trillion economy, he's basically talking about nominal GDP. And nominally, our economy has technically crashed because of the fall in the value of the naira. We went from almost 400 billion to, there was a time it was reported less than 200 billion. So we have actually gone back and we're fourth in nominal terms. But like Prof mentioned, in terms of PPP, purchasing power parity, our economy is more than $1 trillion economy. And that's because what that $1 can buy here and what $1 can buy in America, they are not the same. With $1, maybe can buy more things here in Nigeria than what $1 can buy in America. And that's why the PPP value of our GDP is more than $1 trillion. But nominal values are what the values that you see as given without making adjustments for either inflation or exchange rate or whatever. So basically we are not really doing well when it comes to that, because our per capita has also gone down to maybe 700 considering our population, and we have gone to number 4 when on the African continent because of that.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. National Bureau of Statistics has commenced the rebasing of the GDP as well. The two indicators rebasing started at the same time in 2022-2023. The result of the rebased GDP will be out any moment from now. What I want us to know is this. In 2014, when the GDP was rebased, using 2010 as the base year, GDP of Nigeria became the highest in Africa. But being the highest should not be the joy. No. There are structural changes that people should focus on when GDP is rebased. It's not Nigeria is the biggest in Africa. What will we do with that one if poverty is not addressed? What do we do with that one if unemployment is not addressed? Now, what the National Bureau of Statistics is doing is that after the rebased GDP is out, we let people know the structural changes we have gotten from the results, so that people will know this is what's happening in the livestock sector, this is what is happening in the agricultural sector, this is what's happening in the manufacturing sector, this is what's happening in mining and oil sector. Those are the things we need, not just our GDP is the highest in Africa. What information can we get from that? The structural changes that has occurred between 2010 and, because the current GDP rebasing we are doing now, we are using 2019 as the base year. That means a lot of economic activities that have emerged between 2010 and 2019 that is not yet captured in the GDP. A lot, especially informal activities. And you know, Nigeria, there are a lot of informal activities, which is the highest employer of labor in Nigeria. But the rebased GDP we have done now, which the result will soon be released, informal economic activities are adequately captured. Don't be surprised when the result is announced again. Nigeria may still be number 1 in Africa, but that should not be the joy. The structural changes that the result will bring on board is what I want governments to focus on, investors to focus on, and other economic agents to focus on. But let Nigeria know that GDP rebasing has started. It will soon be released any moment from now. Thank you.
Well, we'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for all of what's been discussed here today regarding the released consumer price index and the impact on the economy. And I know that Nigerians would anxiously await the announcement of the rebased GDP. But for tonight, we'll have to leave this conversation and thank our guests very much for being here. Dr. Ayo Anthony, Head of Prices Division, National Bureau of Statistics. It's a key aspect of this, because for everyone, all we would want Dr. Ayo Anthony to come and say here one day, I say, look, the prices have... and to tell me what my 100 naira is worth today, what it can buy. I'd like to thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me also say, as usual, Professor Ken Ife, always good to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Samson Galadima Simon, CEO, ARC Economics and Data Limited, we'll be asking you to come many more times so we can share in your experience and your thoughts on which way the Nigerian economy. Thank you once more for being here.
Thank you.
And that's our program. Thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. Sales Stoba. Bye for now.